Hello and welcome to this tale of two Copilots. I'm going to be taking you on this journey today through my Copilot life. And the two Copilots I'm going to be working with are Microsoft Copilot and Copilot for Microsoft 365. I'm Sara Fennah. I'm primarily a trainer. I train Microsoft 365, also work as a Microsoft 365 consultant and Microsoft MVP. Too many uses of the word Microsoft in one introduction. It must be time to move on. As I said, I'm going to be talking about two different Copilots. Microsoft Copilot, formerly known as Bing Chat, and Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. Yes, there are lots of Copilots. The last I heard there were 99, but that was before build. And there are probably a lot more by now. But I'm going to focus on these two because those are the two that I use in my day-to-day. Now, before we get much further, let's just compare those two Copilots. So what we've got here is a little table I've built comparing them. I'm using Copilot with an Entra ID or a Microsoft 365 account. If you're using Copilot with a personal account, that individuals column, then there are some differences. As a user of Microsoft 365, I very much want to use the organizational level Copilot for most of the things that I do because I've got that commercial data protection, the knowledge that what I'm putting into my Copilot prompts isn't being used to train the model. Now, sometimes I do dip into other tools such as Microsoft Designer and Microsoft Copilot with a personal Microsoft account does have some nice guidance templates for things like recipes and trip planning, and that can be quite useful as well. But whenever I'm working with any work data, which is the point of the tale of two Copilots, I would always use the Microsoft Copilot signed in with my work account. Also using Copilot for Microsoft 365 with that add-on license so that it is grounded in my Microsoft 365 data, here referenced as the Microsoft Graph grounding. And I really like the way it picks up on the sensitivity labels that are assigned to my content to give that protection. And obviously the enforcement of the security and compliance features, the permissions, the data loss prevention, etc. Those all really reassuring and helpful for me. So I'm working as a Microsoft 365 trainer, as I say. I am independent, so I work primarily on my own. So that's where the use of Copilot in this scenario that I'm going to take you through comes from. Running a small or micro business and the things that I can use Copilot for day to day. If you're looking at a Copilot screen, you're trying to work out, can it access my work data or not? If I go to copilot.microsoft.com and I look at the Copilot there, I have this work web toggle. If I can toggle over to work, then it can see my work data. If I don't have the toggle, it's firmly in the web side of things and it cannot see my Microsoft 365 data. Okay, so background set, on into my Copilot day. So I use Copilot in my day-to-day to summarize long emails. I'm sorry, I have such a lot going on. And I'm also not really very good at reading long things. Long emails, long documents, long blogs. I'm afraid I get quite distracted. So summarizing that content so I know if it's worth my time and effort, and also, also I understand what I'm going to be reading before I read it. So I know the key points before before I get into it. So that's really helpful for me. It does help minimize my tendency to get distracted. Teams chats. Lots of different chats across multiple users from multiple tenants, and it can get really busy sometimes, some of those conversations. And the ability to use Copilot across those chats, either across everything in my tenant or in a single conversation, is really helpful, especially if I've had to ignore it for a few days. Then it can be tough to catch up where it's got really busy. Drafting emails and chat responses, we all know that sometimes those messages that we have to write are a bit challenging to phrase correctly, and I find that using Copilot helps me a lot with those. Fact checking, search is much easier if I can phrase the question as to what I'm looking for in that content than just doing a straightforward search. I do still do ordinary web searches, but mainly I tend to ask Microsoft Copilot instead. I like the way it distills the information into a nice, easy to use response that I can then follow the links for to dig deeper, or go and look for different sources if I want to. Obviously drafting content, yeah, and converting my content to PowerPoints and building images for PowerPoints. Now for me as a trainer, this is where I am probably saving most of my time. A 3-day training, a 1-day training course, sorry, used to take me 3 days to write. I'd write the PowerPoints, I'd then build a reference document to go with it. And if I'm perfectly honest, it could have been better. But now I'm doing it the other way around. I'm using Copilot to help me draft that document in Word, converting it to a PowerPoint. Yes, I do still have work to do on the PowerPoint. It's not my style. And I still have work to do on the Word document as well. But I've knocked a day off that 3-day process. You'll notice something that is missing from my Copilot day. I'm not really using Copilot for meetings. Most of the meetings I attend on a day-to-day basis happen in other tenants. Okay, so I am a guest or an external user coming into that meeting, and therefore Copilot doesn't work for me. I do sometimes ask for the transcript to be downloaded and sent to me so I can run Copilot across it if it's appropriate, or if I know the meeting organizer has a Copilot license, I might ask for a Copilot summary. And I have occasionally sent them prompts I'd like them to run to get specific information out of the meeting for me. Okay, because obviously my Copilot doesn't work in their tenant. So that should give you an idea of my day with Copilot. And I'm going to just jump into a demo to show you some of these techniques that I am using. So I'm going to first of all jump over to this web page. And I like the Work Trend Index site. There's a lot of really useful nuggets in them, but they're not the shortest reads. So I am going to open Copilot in my sidebar, and I'm going to ask it to summarize the key takeaways. Now I'm breaking one of my golden rules for demoing here. I'm actually typing my prompts, and you can see that this is making me really distracted. So I'm going to just click the button. So it's always a really good idea to have your prompt. You're going to work for me this time, Copilot. To have your prompt ready to go. Okay, so Copilot's not happy. It's trying again, but let's try something different then. Okay, so if it doesn't work in my sidebar, I'm over to my main Copilot, Make sure I'm on web because I'm summarizing from the web. And I'm going to ask it to summarize the page with the prompt. Now I've copied this in from my PowerPoint, which is something I do quite a lot, but you'll notice it's trying to add it as an image. It'll try and analyze the image rather than the prompt. So I'm going to remove that. And actually, it would have been much better had I pasted that in as plain text. And there we go. We'll ask it to go off and summarize. Now the sidebar is likely having a challenge working in this particular example because it needs to be re-authenticated, signed in, signed out. One of the challenges of working with multiple accounts is sometimes your tools get confused as to which account you're signed in with and then won't work. Okay, so a couple of useful tips in there. So in here you can see that I have got my summary, I've got the key items, and now I can decide if I need to read that. I think I'm happy with the summary, to be honest. Let's hope I haven't missed anything vital. Okay. The other thing I can do, and for this I tend to switch into creative mode, is ask it to generate me some copy. Ask it to generate something for me. As I say, I tend to work in creative mode for this because I do find that it gives me something very different from what I would have produced myself, and that allows me to then adapt it to my way of working. Now, I will be frank and say I'm not using the best possible prompts here. I'm using quite a generic prompt. I'm not specifying what I want. And that is a deliberate tactic on my part with this particular style of task, because I want to give Copilot the most flexibility to give me things that I perhaps wouldn't have thought about. Whereas I found if I give it too much of a more descriptive prompt, I don't always get the variety of ideas that I might want, that I might not pick up myself. Okay. Now I'm going to carry on from that, and I'm going to ask it to come up with some ideas for the title here. And again, I'm going to be quite vague. Trying to upload my file again. I must remember to paste as plain text when I copy from PowerPoint. Almost like I did it deliberately, maybe. Okay, so it's coming up with some ideas here. And by asking for the word catchy, I've given it a little bit of a guide, but I'm not giving it too much of a steer towards where I want it to go. Again, variety. Copilot thinks differently to me, and that's where the beauty of it lies for me. Now, I am going to ask Copilot to translate this, and I haven't written my prompt, so I'm going to have to type it in manually. Translate the service offering into German. Now, whenever you're demonstrating a translation, there's always a little bit of fear as to if it's going to come up with something in the other language which isn't worded correctly. But it is really useful if you speak a language reasonably well, but you want a starting point, then this is a really nice way to do it. I would recommend, if you were going to publish this information, you perhaps get someone to check it or run it through a professional translation service. But I'm glancing through that and I'm reasonably happy with that. I'm not a native speaker, but I do understand a reasonable amount, so that's good. I want to pitch this service to a customer. Okay, so I'm going to ask Copilot to help me prepare the pitch, and I'm going to ask it to prepare to pitch to a company. So I've given it their website. And this can, again, be very useful because I'm not giving it an awful lot of guidance. Yeah, we've got the service that we're about to pitch. I've got the company I want to pitch it to. And it's coming up with some suggestions as to how I can make the most of that opportunity. By the way, if you work for Norwegian Cruise Lines and you would like me to come and pitch something to you, please do let me know. I will take payment in terms of cruise credits. Thank you very much. Always got to get your requirements in early, haven't you? Anyway, joking aside, it's quite a useful way to come up with ideas as to how you're going to use that information. So those are the sorts of things that I'm doing regularly with Microsoft Copilot. So switching over to Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, this is a little bit harder to demonstrate because you've got to be very careful not to bring on screen your sensitive content. So I have prepared my demo. So here we have a blog about Copilot in a Copilot demos folder, which I can now ask Copilot to summarize for me. So I get a lot of the blogs that I'm interested in following sent to me via Power Automate using RSS. And they land in my inbox and I can then take time to go and read them. But if I haven't got time to read them, at least now I can do this summary of them and I can see what's in that blog and I can decide if I need to spend the time to digest it. And that is very helpful. It's also very useful when you get the weekly Microsoft 365 message center emails to do a summary of that, but also then go further and ask further questions. So those I tend to summarize from the main Copilot app. Okay. I can then pick up this email and forward it to anyone I think it would be useful for. And when it comes to forwarding, I am so lazy. You basically get an FYI email from me if I just think you should see it. Obviously, a poem is not a great way to forward an email, so I'm going to make this a casual FYI and send it on. And hopefully Copilot will come up with something a little bit more interesting than FYI for you. Okay, so I can address that email and send it on. Super easy. Okay. Now in Word, I'm not doing a click the prompt and write a fantastic prompt to get me a document in one go. That doesn't really work for me. Instead, I tend to use prompts to get myself a short paragraph. Okay, so working as an IT trainer of Microsoft 365 for small organizations. Right. An introduction to Copilot for Microsoft 365. Of course. What else would we be doing? Perhaps we should spell it correctly, Sarah, so that Copilot understands what you're asking for. Why are those words we type every day so hard to spell? Okay, now it's going to come up with a reasonable amount of content for me, but there'll be sections I want to expand on. So this is giving me my first outline draft, and I'm going to keep that. I always keep that first draft and then go and read it. I can then highlight that content and look to redraft it. especially now that I'm starting to see the ability to rewrite that by giving it a prompt explaining how I want it worded. But I think probably my favorite drafting feature is, having written a document, go and ask Copilot to inspire me to see what I'm missing. So yeah, it feels that it's done a pretty good job. I might want to go in and add other things, but I think that's probably okay for the demonstration purposes. Now, realistically, drafting a proper document as a guide for a training course would take me a day, even using Copilot. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to save that into my Copilot demos folder. Yeah, and I usually give it a date. Give it a date because it's a demo file. Okay, so then when I'm referring to real files versus demo files that might be similar, I'm not accidentally picking up the wrong file. The other thing I've noticed is if I've just created the file and want to go on and use it, it doesn't always find it. So I'm going to copy a link to this file. Okay, but just before I do, I'm also going to show you how, if I put a different sensitivity label on, when I go and use that file in building my presentation, it's going to pull my sensitivity label over with it. So let's now ask Copilot to create me a presentation from, and it's found it straight away. Of course, whenever I copy the link, it always finds it for me. It's only when I forgot the link that it doesn't find it. Now, another good tip here is, if you've got a certain template to work to, apply the template first before you ask Copilot to go to work, because it does help keep the presentation in the style that you've picked. And I agree that maybe it's not always perfectly how you would want it, but we've always got tools like the slide designer to come up with some different ideas for us as to how we might lay that out. Okay, but I'm not finished with Copilot yet. Okay, just before I move off this, please note it's followed my contains personal data sensitivity label up at the top here. So even though I've labeled it incorrectly, it's followed the guidance it was given. Okay, now I've got a slide here that doesn't have an image on it, and designer's not coming up with anything too helpful. Okay, this is slide 6. So I want to come up with an idea as to what I could create an image with. What description should I use? What would be a good image for that slide? And to be honest, sometimes I just have no inspiration. So Copilot, give me some inspiration. Describe an image which could be used to illustrate the content on this slide. So it's analysing the wording, and I'm hoping it's going to come up with a decent suggestion. Okay. It may put an image in, or it may come up with a description for me as I've asked. If it does just come up with a description for me, then I can use Copilot for web to come up with an image for me. Okay, so an image of a person working on a laptop. Okay, I quite like that description. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that go back into Copilot for web, start a new topic, and ask Copilot to create me an image. Which depicts a person. There we go. And then I can take that image and use it on my slide. So I haven't had to think about a suitable image for that, especially where there's some abstract concepts that you want to illustrate. That can be very helpful. And after all, we're just after something visual that people can look at to know what we're talking about and to listen. Now these are some quite nice images actually, so what I would typically do with these is now save that image into my Copilot generated folder, yeah, and I'd give it a name, so and call that AI Elements 1 and save it. Okay, what I'm now going to do is copy my prompt and create a Word document with the prompt in, complete with my spelling mistakes, because it's important to acknowledge what I really use to create those images. And I also tend to take a screenshot into that Word document as well, so that when I come back to it, I know where that image, what the images look like that I'm looking for. And then this will also go into that same folder. My mouse has disappeared, not helpful. There it is. Okay, let's just browse off so I can use my quick shortcut, and I called it AI Elements. So now my Word document has the same name as my picture, so when I go to use that image, I've got my prompts stored ready that I can use it as well. And then I could save the other images there as well. Okay. So those are some of the tasks I've been using Copilot for, and a quick demo of how I've been using them. You'll also find a lot of people using the intelligent recap. Now, intelligent recap is incredibly useful. This recap is from last year's Commsverse, as we were getting ready to host the Viva track with the Viva Explorers. Names have been redacted to protect the innocent, apart from myself. But this was really useful to recap for those people who couldn't attend. And so sharing these notes with all those people who are from different tenants was very helpful. So copy the notes, save them in a Word document, and send that document out for people to review. Accessing the recaps can be quite tough though, finding where they are, and there's lots of work afoot to make them easier to find. But I personally prefer using the Meet app. This is a new way of looking at your calendar in new Teams. If you haven't found it yet, go through your 3 dots and add it. Really useful. It's a very helpful way of easily accessing your recorded meetings, especially if you've got a lot of appointments in your calendar where you don't have content against it, or you don't have recordings. Your recent list, you can filter for those you've missed, those that were recorded, and those that have content, so you can easily access the recap through those references on the side. There's little icons next to each meeting, those link to the recording and give me the recap. So in my tale of 2 Copilots, I've taken you through my day to show you the sorts of things that I'm using it for. And in this slide here, the orange coloured ones, like summarise long emails, which to me looks orange. That colour is indicating where I'm using Copilot for Microsoft 365, whereas the alternative colour, which to me is blue, such as search and fact checking, is where I'm using Microsoft Copilot, formerly known as Bing Chat, or Bing Chat Enterprise in my case, because I'm signed in with my Microsoft account. Where you've got both colours on that drafting content, I do use both. I will draft directly in Word or in Outlook, but sometimes it's easier to draft in Microsoft Copilot. I get something a little bit different because it's not referencing the content I have already in my tenant. It's a bit more creative, comes up with some different ideas. And those are my two Copilots. Now together, aside from training demonstrations, I estimate, I've not tracked it, but I estimate I am saving 1 to 2 hours a day. Now, we all know, or anyone who knows me knows I work far too hard. So let's say 1 hour a day for normal working hours. And I'm addicted. I love it. I love my job. My job is my hobby. So an hour for my job, an hour for my hobby. How's that? And with the training courses, when I'm writing those, as I say, that's cutting about 1/3 of creating custom courses from scratch in terms of the investment time. So for me, the Copilot tools, the two of them together, are offering me a significant recovery of time that I can invest into more time on my hobby and doing things like these sessions, which I hope is giving you some ideas as to how you can build Copilot into your day. Now, one of the things you need to grasp is how you prompt for yourself. Okay, what are you going to construct your prompts like to get the best out of Copilot in the way you work? Now, there's some really great examples of prompts out there on the internet, lots of really useful guidance, and they will all tell you to make sure you include 4 ingredients: context, your goal, what it is you're trying to produce, the source information that you're using, that you want Copilot to use to build the output that you're asking for, and the style. Now, I find it very helpful to use the acting as line, giving Copilot the job role I want it to perform. So as a small business owner, I'm acting as an accountant, I'm acting as a trainer, as a HR manager, all sorts of different hats I have to wear. So it's really helpful for me that I can get Copilot to wear those hats with me. And with the style as well, one of the things I've discovered is how you word your prompt to make sure you're not building your own bias into the outputs. Now, with images, I've been using the term with a diverse group of people, and that gets me variety of skin color, gender, and size and shape. More skin color and gender than size and shape, but it's improving. And I've also recently come across an article that talks about how to make your prompt inclusive. So changing your wording. And if nothing else, add into your prompt, ensuring the language used is inclusive. If nothing else, that will help you ensure that what Copilot is giving you is perhaps more inclusive than you might be on your own without it. We can all do better. And this guidance is taken from the Microsoft adoption site, all about inclusiveness in your prompts. It's mainly aimed at adverts and writing advert copy, but I think the techniques described in here can benefit us all when we're writing content using AI and the prompts. So I've been trying to build this into all of my prompting going forward to try and get a bit more variety into my output and ensuring that any inadvertent bias that I've built into my prompt does not follow through into the content. Of course, there are some fun bits with Copilot, and I've been having lots of fun generating images. These are a couple of my favorite images from PowerPoint presentations that I've been doing about Copilot. The one on the right with the gear icon is all about compliance. The one in the middle is about building your Copilot diary so you can record your successes and ideas. I use a OneNote notebook for that, and it's very helpful for me to harvest ideas from for other things. If I come across a good idea, it goes in my notebook. Something works really well, it goes in my notebook, and my Copilot diary then helps me Copilot more efficiently. I love doing my fingernails, but sometimes I'm lacking ideas, especially going over to MVP Summit this year. So Copilot came up with some ideas for me based on my prompt. And then probably my favorite diagram and my favorite image that I've built with Copilot is in response to the LinkedIn conversation that was happening towards the end of last year with everyone using Microsoft Designer to build a cartoon image of themselves, build themselves an avatar. And I really like that little avatar. It sums up everything that I want to say about my community persona. So it's a very nice little output. I've never managed to make another avatar quite as good as that one. So obviously the look rather than the prompt. So that was my tale of two Copilots. How Copilot is being used day to day in my job to help me fit in all of the work and all of the fun or community work, all of my hobbies into 24 hours a day, with maybe a little bit of sleep in there as well. So hopefully Copilot can help you be equally productive and go out, have fun, enjoy, try them out. I would encourage you also to subscribe to the Copilot Connections podcast if you haven't already. And thank you to the Copilot Connection for hosting this month of Copilots. There's some great sessions out there that they are putting out in the month of Copilot, and some brilliant podcast session episodes to catch up on. Go back to the beginning and start from the beginning if you haven't listened. It gives you a great view of how Copilot has evolved as well as we've gone through the last few months. Thank you all for your time, and hopefully see you soon.